So recently I've been working on revamping the integrated shutter speed tests that are a feature of lenses that have an integrated shutter. So um, previously I had, it looked very similar, but I had milliseconds. I think I had a percentage there. I think the math was wrong and a number of other things. So I tried to spruce this feature up. The biggest change I made is I switched from milliseconds to microseconds. And why did I do that? Well, I was previously using the Audacity method of doing shutter speed tests, where you record the sound of the shutter speed, you look at the waveform in Audacity, and then you measure what that is. It will give you a number in milliseconds of what the distance on the waveform is, and you can use that to sort of figure out what the tests are. If you're not following me, that's fine because it's a complicated way to do it, and I never want to do that again. Instead, I want to do this. So this is a shutter speed tester designed by Ethan of Cameradactyl, and it's Arduino and just a handful of parts. In fact, it makes a very good intro to Arduino, I would say, because it's a simple thing. He's written all the code. It's available for free, the code, and the electronics aren't expensive. So in my case, I had quite a few Arduinos running around, but even if you don't, um, it's not an expensive build, but it's super useful. Essentially, what you do is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you can rig up pointing a laser through your lens, and then you put the sensor at the back of your shutter. In this case, he's using a normal camera, but same would be true for a large format lens. You fire the shutter, and it essentially tells you what your accuracy was, how long the shutter was open, with pretty damn good precision. So this was way better than using Audacity. It was faster, it's more accurate, and coupled with some of the improvements I made on the FilmLog, gives me actual useful numbers finally. So this is the feature, and a couple things to note that I thought were interesting that weren't maybe as obvious before I revamped this. If you look at the split, the difference between these two numbers, I mean, it's given it's 1/500th of a second. If you know that, I mean, this is pretty large. It's almost a stop off. But look, just if we subtract those two together, it's kind of a small-ish number compared to like this one. But look at how accurate this is. So um, what I mean, these lenses are mechanical, so I wouldn't expect this is going to be perfect. But the takeaway for me is that yes, which is maybe obvious, faster shutter speeds are going to drift a lot more than slower shutter speeds because you have less time, or rather, the time needs to be more accurate. So you can, 1 second, you can almost count that by hand or just put something over the lens. But 1/500th of a second is 2 milliseconds, in this case 2000 microseconds, and that's just not a lot of time. So all my lenses have this. It perhaps is a surprise to no one who shoots large format, where my sweet spot tends to be like here, depending on the lens. So this is my Fujinon, arguably the best one of the bunch, but we can look at my 210, and this uses a press shutter, so I think that may be one of the reasons why this one tends to drift more. So 1/60 is pretty bad, for example. But the fastest shutter speeds of all of my lenses are always super off. So, which is good to know. So it's not to say that they're not useful. It's just that now I know what I need to compensate for, especially if I'm shooting something like slide film. But I would say in general, for me, if I'm not shooting something that requires fast action, which is not often the case with at least the large format cameras I use, then I know I can kind of be within a kind of reasonable range, or at least pick the shutter speed or speeds that are going to be most accurate for my given aperture. And if I'm really in a hard space where I need to use a fast or an accurate shutter speed, I know to compensate. So, which is nothing new. I mean, Ansel Adams talked about this in his book series, to test these things and write them down. So, speaking of, you can print these if you'd like. If you don't want to write them down, in your notebook by hand, you can print these and put them on cardstock, laminate them, or whatever you want to do, and put them with your lenses, which is actually what I do. I keep all my lens tests just in a little pouch on my camera bag. That's essentially the feature. So, if you have a lens, all you really need to do is make sure. I need to set this up so you can modify existing lenses. So you can say if it has a shutter or not, but I'll get there. For now, you can make a lens and you just say, yes, it has an integrated shutter, and if so, you'll get the ability to put the speed test in. I will probably add that into normal cameras as well, since a vast majority of cameras, well, maybe not those, but vast majority of cameras have integrated shutters, and you can optionally test them if you want, and get the similar information, so if you need to compensate for the camera. I didn't do that initially, and perhaps I should have, but my focus really was on large format mechanical lenses because I had figured they would be much more problematic than cameras that I have that have electronic shutters. So, any case, and because real quick while I'm here, I did mention, I think in the last video, film holders, and I thought I'd give a peek into how I actually use these. So you can see I've loaded most of my holders, and I've got some holders that I still need to develop that I haven't yet, which is why they're exposed, because the film is still in the holder. And then I have almost all my film holders loaded and ready to go, just so that if I needed to want to go take a picture and I'm short on time, I can open this page, know immediately what's in what holder, grab the ones I need, optionally mark down on my notepad what's in them, go take the shots. When I come back, if I don't immediately develop them, I can go here and basically say, yes, I exposed these sheets, and so on and so forth. So I found this actually pretty useful. Other people may have different workflows, but for me, this kind of worked out pretty well, given I have what looks to be a fairly large amount of film holders. I mean, it's really only half of these, because each holder, quote unquote, is really just one side. So 1 and 2 are one holder, but nonetheless, I probably have more than I need, honestly. So I'm making use of it, I suppose. Also, the one thing I want to note is if you're planning on using the FilmLog, if this is the first time you've seen this video on how to do shutter speed tests, if that's all you want to use the FilmLog for, A, there's plenty of other features you might want to look at, but B, if you're not interested in those features, all you really need is this tool. So honestly, can't thank Ethan enough. Folks owe that dude a beer, if nothing else, because this thing is a wonderful tool. It tells you basically everything that you can see from this screen. I'm calculating some of this in the actual app, but he does the same thing. So if you just want to test shutter speeds and that's it, definitely take a look at this. At this point, I would probably never recommend folks use the audio way of just recording the sound of the shutter. I mean, it works, but it's not accurate. At least it wasn't for me when I compared my results. I don't have them available, but I can definitely say that this was much, much more accurate. Anyways, that's it. So if folks are interested in using it, you have one of two ways to do so. You can grab FilmLog. It's open source. So if you know a thing or two about Python and Docker and stuff, you can just check the source out and either use the Docker file or just run a Python virtual environment. The Docker file doesn't include a database, so you may have to set that up on your own. And if people run into trouble, let me know. If you're not familiar at all with Python, this is not what you want. But if you know how to write some code and you're cool setting up web apps, then you should be able to sort of at least wade through this and figure it out. If not, or if you don't want to mess with it, I should say if you do want to mess with it and you start working on it, and definitely submit bugs and patches and all that sort of stuff. It is open source, so feel free to do so. But if you want to use a hosted version, I'm offering this version, the FilmLog.org, currently for free, and that will probably kind of went back and forth on that, but I think I'm probably always going to make it, at least the vast component of it, or at least the open source component of it, free, maybe donationware, I don't know, something like that. But you can go here, set up a free account, and use it. It's essentially the same thing that I just showed you here, only this is my personal install. The one downside I would say is that since not a lot of people are using FilmLog.org, and there's the extra gotcha of if I roll out a new feature and it breaks a bunch of stuff, I don't keep it super up to date necessarily. So the new shutter speed stuff is actually not in the FilmLog.org hosted version. It will be at some point, and that will happen sooner if people are actually interested in this feature and want to see it and want to use it. Then I'll put that up sooner than later. Otherwise, I tend to be kind of slow and methodical about those updates, just so what I do put up there is seems like it works well enough. In any case, that's it. So I'm sure I'm going to probably make another video on. I said I'm sure and probably, which that's an opposite. But anyway. I'll likely make another video on some other FilmLog features as I work on them. There are some sort of in the hopper. Not a whole lot right now, but I kind of do them in spurts. So I go through bouts of actually taking pictures and using the FilmLog, and then when I can't take pictures, I kind of work on the website. So until that time, I'm just gonna stop rambling and press finish recording.